Well, good morning and thank you for joining us. In some areas, AI capabilities are accelerating at an exponential rate. A recent Forbes report suggested that 72% of businesses have adopted AI for at least one business function, and this is up from just 33% in 2023. And so, with all of the noise around the subject, it is no wonder then that leaders across organizations of all sizes are asking whether or how they might get value from AI. And even for those organizations that are already exploiting AI, there are real questions around return on investment, security, and governance, to mention a few. So, how can organizations deal with the pressures, the risks, and the opportunities associated with AI adoption? I am OPI Lair, Executive Partner at Maxica. We are a business and technology consultancy specializing in transformation design and delivery. To discuss these questions and more, I am joined today by Samuel Mann. Samuel is the head of IT for the corporate office at ABF, a FTSE 30 global multi-brand, multi-divisional organization, where he leads technology strategy, governance, and delivery across the central functions. With over 25 years of experience in FMCG, retail, and manufacturing, Samuel partners with senior leaders to address complex challenges, specializing in large-scale transformation, modernization, and cyber resilience. I'm also joined by Kevin Adams. Kevin is an award-winning senior leader with over 35 years experience leading technology and change across multiple sectors. He is currently the Senior Executive Director of Resources at the Donkey Sanctuary, where he leads global strategy and corporate functions. He is recognized as a CIO 100 leader and as a fellow of the BCS. Also on the panel with me today is Richard Truman. Richard is a delivery director at Maxica with over 20 years of experience in technology, change, and digital delivery. Richard specializes in turning complex environments into scalable, well-governed solutions, leveraging data, automation, and power platform to enable effective and secure adoption of AI and low-code technologies. Finally, on the panel with me today is Adrian Knight. He is the head of technical solutions at Maxica with over 25 years experience spanning multiple sectors. He provides technical and architectural leadership for complex transformation programs, helping organizations leverage emerging technologies to deliver effective, scalable solutions. Welcome to the panel. I am really looking forward to our discussions today, and I wanted to start by saying attendees can type any questions into the Q&A using the Q&A button at the top of the screen. We will aim to get to as many questions as we can through the webinar. Please note that the questions in the Q&A section will be visible to all attendees, but we really would love to get some real interaction going with the audience today. Okay, let's get started. I really wanted to begin by asking the panel about the demand for AI adoption. You know, that report from Forbes, which kind of just talked about the vast majority of organizations now using AI, for me is interesting. And I've been in multiple discussions recently with IT leaders that, you know, across different sectors who are being asked by their board or by exec teams to roll out AI across their organizations. We're certainly seeing this as well in sectors like higher education, where, you know, students and staff kind of expect to turn up, you know, and use AI as part of their learning or as part of their work. Samuel, I wanted to come to you first and ask whether you are kind of seeing this sort of top-down and bottom-up demand, you know, for AI in ABF, and what might be the pressures kind of driving this push for AI in your setting.
Thank you, Opie, for having me, and also thanks for the very warm welcome introduction as well. I would say, you know, the initial hype, we saw, you know, tons of pressure, huge pressure, you know, coming into the ABF and to the center, just around, you know, the possibility that that the introduction of AI could make a difference. not just in everyday productivity, but also, game changing in the way of solving, problems. And I would have said that the hype is has settled down, quite a bit, and we haven't seen the level of pressure that we saw kind of 2 years ago, with the introduction of kind of AI and all the hype around it from a couple of years ago. We've taken a very deliberate approach, around AI, not to kind of rush into tools and technology. And I think from an executive perspective, as well as our colleagues, senior colleagues across the center, we were keen to not rush into technology and tools, and instead kind of focusing on getting confident, with the technology. So countering the pressure by getting comfortable with AI, making sure that it can be safely and sensibly used in a way that fits within our kind of control environment within a kind of corporate PLC. So yes, tons of pressure. Art of the possible. Can it be game changing? But I think the hype and the pressure has settled down quite a bit over the last 6 months or so.
If I could just chip in a little bit on that, I think, as Samuel just said, there was a huge amount of hype 18 months ago. A lot of people jumped onto the bandwagon. For us in the Donkey Sanctuary, it's less about top-down pressure. It's more about combination of opportunity and expectation management. We know that there are potential productivity gains, particularly in our back office functions and decision supports that we have to undertake. Like most organizations, we feel pressure of financial constraints. We're very grateful and very fortunate to have a very loyal group of supporters that support our cause around the world. And we see AI as a means of doing more with limited resources. We're also seeing a level of expectation from our user community. So people are already starting to use AI outside the work context and feel that we don't want to be lagging behind, particularly where they see themselves productivity gains in the work that they undertake outside work. So it's that matching of the user expectation. And we certainly see it now as something that can help with some of our service as well. So I think the big shift for us in terms of the democratization of it is it's a bit more about, it's not perceived as a specialist capability as part of the original hype cycle. It's embedded in many of the tools that people operate on, either in their personal lives or at work context. So it's embedded in the product. So it's not an add-on. It's not something else that they've got to overcome. So the change resistance to actually moving to take advantage of some of the components of it have been greatly reduced. And I think that's a bit like Samuel. Everyone can jump onto the hype cycle, be the early adopters, forge their way through some of those difficulties. I think we have a conscious status here where we are an early adopter, but we're not an early adopter, we're an early follower. So once some of that hype curve has sort of transitioned into the downward curve of the wave, we start to then really start to take a good look at exactly how we might take advantage of that investment that some of our suppliers are putting in hundreds of millions of dollars into research and development as to how to get the best out of it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Sorry, Samuel, do you want to come back to that?
Well, I was just going to say, and I think, Kevin, we were careful not to position it as kind of anything revolutionary. And, it was more about, speeding up and improving the kind of the way you work. So it was basically a mindset shift, that this technology is okay and you can use it to kind of create a foundation. And that has served us well in terms of kind of where we are now with AI tech.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, that resonates. I think with some of the things that we are seeing. I mean, Richard, I don't know if do you want to just say a few words from your perspective about what we're seeing sort of in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really encouraging to hear from Samuel and both Kevin there in that effectively resisting the pressures and doing things the right way at a pace that is suitable for that organisation, because a lot of organisations are feeling a tremendous amount of pressure from a multitude of different directions. There's the market pressure that competitors are talking about AI, suppliers are already embedding it into products, and leadership teams are asking how they can use it to improve productivity, their service delivery, and of course the decision making. But then you've got stakeholder expectations as well. So staff, customers, and students, boards, investors are increasingly aware of AI, and there's often an expectation that organisations already have a plan. If not, they're already partway through the delivery and implementation of these tools. And then at the same time, you've got many organisations that feel kind of facing a capacity challenge where they don't have enough people who fully understand the technology, the underlying data and the risks, and then how to turn those AI ideas and concepts into a safe and useful operational change that will actually deliver value for their business. Laid on top of that, then there's also ethical and governance considerations. So AI can create value, but it can also introduce a multitude of risks around bias, transparency, data leakage, and then there's accountability and inconsistency around decision making. So when all of these stack up, you can see it's kind of a pressure cooker in environment. So when we're talking about the democratization of AI, I think we're not just talking about giving people access to the tools, but we're talking about creating the right conditions where people can use those tools in a safe environment, and they can do so confidently and effectively.
Yeah, I mean, it's just thanks, Richard. Just that's such a nice flow from what Samuel and Kevin have just been saying. And I think we'll get into some of that. But before we move further, I kind of wanted to get some audience participation going on. And, we would like to kind of get a sense, for what are the things that perhaps are getting in the way if you are on this journey of data and AI adoption. What are the things that are getting in the way? They'll be great to kind of get some participation. All you need to do is to scan the QR code, and you'll be able to sort of select an option. We'll come back and look at the results at the end to see what people see as the barrier if they're kind of trying to get on this journey. I'll leave that on the screen for a little bit longer, but I wanted to come back to the panel. It's been really interesting to just hear your reflections in this area, and I think all of you have kind of talked about the range of models and tools available, the increasing complexity of these tools, multiple tools available for the same thing. Now, for many of us, I think it's common practice when we are comparing alternatives to design a scorecard that might help us test the alignment of the different options that we've got available with those objectives that we aim to achieve. And Samuel, you were kind of speaking earlier on about some of the drivers and things within your business about not simple worker productivity, but actually game-changing art of the possible type things. So I guess giving the pressure, some of this pressure, even if it, albeit might be easing in certain areas, if you were designing a scorecard, can I just ask you, Sam, perhaps offer up two things that would feature on your scorecard when you're kind of considering these sort of AI model or AI tool selection?
That's a good question. And the experience that I've had, over the last couple of years, definitely one of the things that we've looked at, because we use quite a lot of kind of off the shelf tech, and when we were being introduced to some of this technology and how the vendors were using AI, very early on, we saw that a lot of the products were focused on one kind of AI model, whether it be OpenAI or Anthropic, we found that those products weren't strong at addressing some of the use cases. So we quickly pivoted towards, making sure that the technology that we were going after had the capability to use multiple different AI models to cater for different use cases. So that's been, extremely important, when we've done our assessment around, choosing a vendor for AI, and the results have been a lot higher in terms of the end product from the tech when it's using kind of multiple AI models.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Samuel. That's a really interesting approach. Kevin, what's been the view from your perspective? What might be a couple of things that you will consider when you're just thinking about selecting these models on a scorecard?
So we treat this as pretty much like any other enterprise technology decision that we go through, but we do focus on two specific areas in more detail. One is about risk to us, and I can talk about risk in terms of security and compliance, transparency and explainability, particularly when we're using it to help us make decisions. Data compatibility, I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about that, and data maturity in a little while, but it's the same as any other enterprise application, but the risk and ethics around how we are using it, and that's that business value alignment piece that we spend a lot more time debating and discussing. So standard ways of operating, but with enhanced focus on, as I say, risk and ethics primarily.
Yeah, that's really interesting there, because I think the ethical consideration thing is so important. I mean, obviously you're a charity, but I think even for organizers like ABF, which is kind of really strong ethical approach kind of running through what you do, I think that's certainly something that we need to think about, organizers need to think about when they are kind of approaching or comparing tools. Now, Richard, I know you've been doing some work in this area just to think about what some of those categories might be that a scorecard might need to cover. Can you just share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most organisations are already working with a mix of tools, and Samuel's example of a use case of choosing different models in a complementary way is a very sensible approach. But often vendors are building tools and access to models in a non-elective way, in which these things are being built in, and you don't get the opportunity to opt out of them. So being very deliberate about that choice becomes even more important. And with the proliferation of these tools, there's lots and lots of overlaps. So when we start to think about, well, what would a scorecard look like? I'd be starting to look with the strategic fit. So is this actually aligned to what the organisation is trying to achieve? Or is it just solving a local problem in isolation? Because something can work technically, but it still might not be the right investment for that organisation. Moving on to the comprehensiveness of the solution. So does the tool actually meet the need? But also, is it the right level of capability? So some tools can be really feature rich, which is great. Again, a whole broad spectrum of features, but that can introduce complexity and overhead, and again, overlap. So it's about finding something that is the right size for the problem. Does it address your foundational needs? So when we come to these needs, we're really talking about whether this fits properly into the organisation in terms of, is it secure? Does it meet your compliance and data requirements? Can it integrate with what you already have in your existing systems? And can you actually support it in the long term? Because if those aren't in place, then it might solve a problem, but potentially it's going to create bigger issues later on. And then all importantly is the scalability and the growth. So if it works, can we extend it? Can we use it with other teams? Can it be governed properly? Or are we creating something that will just work once but won't go much further than that? So really the scorecard is about giving a simple way of just stepping back and making those decisions properly and deliberately. So not just does it work, but is it the right choice for our organisation?
Yeah, I mean that organizational view is so important because again, context changes, doesn't it? I think there'll be
Yep.
similarities in Kevin's context and in Samuel's context. So if you're from a university, there'll be similarities, some common things, but there'll be some of those specifics, around the specific organizational context. I think Samuel, this is part of what you were saying earlier on when you were thinking about, beyond just the worker productivity, what is the art of the possible kind of game changing, you know. I guess from your perspective, Samuel, is this one of those areas that you kind of look at thinking very carefully about context when you are just thinking about how you pick a tool, or pick a model to use?
Yeah, and again, that's an experience thing, because we have done, quite a few proof of concepts, across the different functions, and the result, in the early days, was not great. I mean, I don't think any of the POCs we did blew us away, in any shape. And so it's a lesson that we've certainly, learned, not the hard way, because there are some good things in terms of mindset. Um, but you definitely need to go into it kind of eyes wide open. Usually, you will learn something, about a use case that might apply somewhere else in the business, and they can get value, out of that. I think through most of the POCs, that we went into, it didn't quite land the use case that we were after. We were, quite focused on that. We learned something, and we were able to apply those, some of those use cases to other areas of our business.
That's great. We'll come and talk about use cases in a bit more detail a bit later on. But I think you're beginning to hit on some really, really great things there, Samuel. Thanks. But I wanted to talk about data, of course, and we kind of beginning to move into the question about data and governance. So Kevin, I guess, most organizations will have the challenge, really, I see you're smiling already, of needing to kind of deploy these technologies, these capabilities into technology environments which have legacy systems, fragmented data, often in certain spaces, unclear ownership, might be a challenge. And so the importance of really thinking carefully about getting your data ready and, I think about governance, cannot be overstated. Can I just speaking specifically about that question of kind of getting your data ready? What's been the approach at the Donkey Sanctuary?
I think it's probably fair to say that everyone on this call would say that their data readiness remains probably one of their biggest challenges, particularly in organizations that have got some sort of legacy estate. And I would say my organization has definitely got a legacy estate. Like Samuel, we've run a number of proof of concept, and we've really taken what I call a pragmatic data readiness approach. So we could hold things up and spend hours and hours and days and weeks creating the perfect data sets. But for proof of concepts in particular, we just needed to be good enough, understand where we've got gaps, and focus really on fixing some of those critical data sets first, with a clear view that we're going to accept that the AI use cases are going to be imperfect as a consequence of that. Then the next phase is, if this is something that we want to scale out, we then start to look at introducing data standardization, particularly where it adds value. It doesn't add value everywhere, but where it does add value. And also, again, one of our future new design strategies is making best use of our integration. That can make a massive difference. And rather than doing big bang, reducing technical debt, it's been a phrase I've been doing this job for quite a while. I look a lot older now than I did in that picture that I sent you. You know what? Technical debt's been around for decades, if not even longer than I've been in this. And yeah, let's keep that momentum moving. And then also building on the AI governance framework that we've put in. It's a task in itself, keeping up to speed with what's actually happening in the AI sector. So it's just getting some very simplistic, clear usage policies, understanding the risk tiering of use cases, decision making in particular, and where we need it, make sure that we've got human in the loop requirements built into the designs. It's not perfect. It's pretty. I think people have been in agile for some time, where people get certainly application development, where you want to develop more business value oriented applications. It's very similar, and actually treating it differently, I think, is actually a bit of a misnomer. Keep to those really good design principles that have held true to the software industry for, for half a century, I would suggest. You know what, you're not going to go far wrong, but focus on the things that create additional risk.
I'm sure Adrian, with music to Adrian's ears, hearing design principles, and when I can kind of see him chuckling. Samuel, I'm going to come back to you in a moment, but Adrian, with your architecture hat on, I guess what might be some of those key areas that organizations need to look at when they're thinking about about getting the data. And I know you've been working with Samuel and ABF, in some of these areas, but what might be some of those core things, just briefly, you might want to touch on, because I'm keen for us to move on to a couple of other things.
Sure. No, as you say, I think we hear this very a lot, and I think to Kevin's point, everyone's very concerned about the sort of the readiness of their data, and really want to know how should they prepare. And I think pragmatically, it's got to be the approach. As they all businesses have a lot of historical data and data that they don't even know who the owners are. And as we know, that's the real challenge with AI, is that it needs to be grounded in your information, but with the right information. You want to reduce those hallucinations, where it's bringing back results from incorrect data or out of date data. So as you say, this one we obviously has been working with the ABF on this recently, around trying to look at ways of getting your data ready for AI to consume it. And this is where you can look at actually assessing the data and tagging and categorizing it. And that takes away some of the sort of ambiguity around how the AI is just looking at the content of the information and trying to, I guess, almost second guess what it's actually being used for. So trying to tag it around the particular function that it's being used for. And there's lots of tools that can do this, and Purview for one, and other systems that can actually tag that data so AI knows what's being used for. But also the categorization. I mean, security of the data is always a concern, and people being given access via AI to data they shouldn't do. So making sure you've got those clear categorizations, agreed and applied to the actual data. So then the AI can be restricted to only the data that should have access to. We also look around the improving the data quality. So architecturally, when we're designing solutions, making sure that we're looking at the correct data sources and bringing in the information from the correct systems, and building in rules and controls to sort of cleanse that data where required, really helps AI to bring the most value. Because I think the worst thing is that people using tools, they get rubbish out, then they start second guessing what the AI is doing, and then any of the productivity gains that they get from using AI go completely out the window because they end up doing it themselves. So yeah, it's a constant process, and I say it's not something you can fix overnight, but it's just starting that process of really reviewing and understanding your data.
Yeah, Samuel, I'd like to come back to you now. I think, again, I think most of us are complex, but your multidivisional nature, some of the things that you're dealing with at the center, really thinking very carefully about your data readiness, but actually expanding that slightly to think about governance, that you put around kind of this AI capabilities is really key. I'd like some reflections from you about, I guess, some of those key things that you look for in terms of getting your data ready, but also just, if you could, as part of your remarks, just address how you are kind of negotiating governance, specifically for this within the broader context of IT governance in your environment. I think that'd be great to get some reflections from you.
Yeah. We have, definitely, baked in kind of AI in our approach, which means you need to have the right level of governance. There's things like having the right governance committees in place, as well as your policies, your AI policies, and having an inventory of AI tools in use. All of these things are a really, really great practice. But I'll probably look at this from the other way as well, from a when you're trying to get started with this thing. I would say it's just being careful with not putting too much governance in place, that you slow down or stymie creativity and use of the tools, or you end up implementing tools without the functionality that makes it a rich experience for the user base. So governance can be great, but you can also overdo it and really put people off, being creative and trying to use it to help improve day to day is kind of what I would say from my experience there. And on the data side, Opie, this is an area that I think AI can be game changing. I think this is absolutely one of the areas that I think when it comes to seeing some value in ABF, outside of the stuff that Adrian was talking about in terms of our everyday use and how we use our own personal data and shared data. But there's big data sets in procurement and treasury where we've seen the use of agentic AI can really make a difference in terms of being able to normalize big data and give a extreme level of accuracy that would just not have been possible in ABF without having tech and tools and a process that can take large data sets from around the group and then be able to normalize that data and give a high degree of accuracy in things like spend data, which is I've been very impressed, and I think this is for me is one of the game changing kind of areas for AI in my experience so far.
Yeah, that's great. Sam, I think that's sorry. Go on, Kevin.
I was just going to say, I was just listening to Samuel there, and I have a phrase that I use quite a lot here, which is governance is designed to enable a safe use of tooling, not as acting as a barrier. So it's getting that balance right. You've got to building an element of risk, but actually a lot of governance is designed to ensure that whatever tools we decide to use, it's safe for us to do so. And safe is a big word and it encapsulates many different things. But for me, I always try and distill it down into non-techie speak for people, because quite honestly, when we're talking to our business colleagues, you have to speak their language. It's safe. We've done this because now we can move to make it safe. It's not designed to stop you from doing it, because that's where you get that pinch point with pressure. And that I love the little diagram that you put up in terms of all of that building up. If you can help understand that actually what we're trying to do through this governance approach is making the tooling safe for the organization to adopt, it becomes a lot easier a conversation to be having with people.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're absolutely right. And we'll talk about governance, but actually, Samuel, I think it's a really good point to just, I guess, bounce off what you were saying a moment ago about some of the areas where you've seen value in kind of handling those very large data sets and kind of generating insights from that. And you spoke a bit about agentic AI, and I know some people might not be. I mean, I guess just for completeness, for the purposes of kind of that difference and thinking about agentic, because this is beginning to lean into where the value is, from where the value is, from these technologies. There's kind of automation, agentic AI, etc. And Simon, I'm going to come back to you in just one second. But Richard, for those who are not clear what agentic AI is versus kind of just automation, for example, can you just very briefly, probably in about 30 seconds, just give a quick précis?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just talking about RPA and agentic AI in the context of process automation, which is, I think, something that's accessible in terms of the application of AI to realise value quite early on in that journey. So RPA really is around if the inputs are predictable, the steps are clear, and the outcome is known, then that's a great candidate for RPA. So you're essentially realizing efficiency through consistency. Agentic automation, really where you have a use case that the system's not just following rules, it's actually interpreting, it's making some decision, and it's progressing work. So it's really strongest where the process involves some context or some judgment or orchestration or triage. So for example, if a student service agent was to triage incoming queries from students, it can understand what's being asked of it, whether the issue is around admissions or finance registry, and then it has the ability to make a judgment call, route that to the right team, and enrich that data from other sources. And in fact, Microsoft's tech stack is pretty much aligned to those two camps there. So if we're thinking about RPA, but probably in the Power Automate camp from the Power Platforms suite. And if you're talking about agentic, then Microsoft provides the Copilot Studios and other tools to help with the development of those automations.
Thank you. Now, I just wanted, so Samuel, you were speaking earlier about some of those areas with these big data sets, and I know this is an area that Richard and the team have done some work with you, especially with your treasury function, kind of, helping them to kind of be leveraging some automation, but kind of overlaying that with some visualization capability. How has that been received by the business in terms of the status quo prior to that work and what that's then resulted in?
Very well received, actually, where AI probably hasn't been a revolution. This data visualization has been a bit of a revolution across many of the functions. Whether it be treasury and the work that we've done with that team on some of their products, and being able to give insights on things around cash across the organization, and looking at our legacy systems. And I think what Kevin was saying there, we've definitely got plenty of legacy systems, and even when the data comes out of these systems, it absolutely makes no sense to anyone. So it's taken like a huge amount of work from Richard and the team, working closely, with the treasury team, or working closely with the procurement team on their data sets to really help them get the insights that they were kind of looking for, and find new things that we didn't see before, that can help us solve problems that we haven't been able to solve in the past, through our focus on data automation and visualization.
That's great. Thank you. I think that's really good. I wanted to quickly pause just for a moment here. We might come back and just touch briefly just one point around governance. But if there are people on the call today, and there's things that you've heard, if you are kind of on this journey and you're thinking about perhaps how you select models, how you build a scorecard, etc., we would love to talk to you. You can kind of book a free no obligation call. The details are on the screen there. You can kind of contact Sarah. We'll be delighted to set something up with you, both in terms of helping you think about tailoring governance, about building those scorecards. It'll be great to kind of hear from you. But just moving quickly on, in the interest of time, I really wanted to just come back and talk about, you've kind of where you've then selected a solution. You're thinking now about scaling and about adoption. How do you you've spoken, both Kevin and Samuel, you've spoken repeatedly about pilots in your organization. So I wanted to touch on how you would introduce some of these new models. If you have someone who's kind of at the start of their journey, or who's thinking about introducing new models. Kevin, in terms of where you are, what kind of approach are you taking to pilot and assess the effectiveness of these AI tools at the charity?
So I'll start with really what we're seeing is AI opportunities emerging where they augment existing processes rather than replacing them entirely. So what that means is we start with pretty well scoped, low risk pilots. It's as I say, we're early follower. We're not a jump in. So defining what that looks like, it's an iterative model. We want to make sure that as part of that scope, we understand both the quantitative and qualitative benefits associated with it. Going back to those, we're treating some of these use cases pretty much like we would do any other financial investment, and it is investment because it's an investment in time for us as a charity, and we really need to make sure that we're justifying all of that. Engaging users early is really, really important. And then I think as importantly, and I think this is sort of Samuel alludes to this as well, is scale selectively. Not all of these need to be enterprise-wide solutions. They are often solving a departmental challenge. Could be data, could be staffing, could be finances, could be whatever. Once we've got that, we tend to move into sort of what we call our adoption phase. And that's where we start to build confidence, particularly around staff capability and confidence with the tooling, continuing to refresh those guardrails, the guidance, but also giving the opportunity to showcase how quickly it is to build some of these tools. You don't need particular expertise in many cases. That comes with an element of risk, but that goes back to my decision-making process right at the very, very beginning. And what I will say is there's a real value in considering a center of excellence type model, because it provides structure and consistency. It accelerates knowledge sharing and capability building. You know, we keep going on and on about it. It's been around for quite some time, but I really do think this type of technology really is set up for that type of agile type of build, deploy, expand methodology, which center of excellence can support.
That's great. Thank you, Kevin. That's really good. I think a sense of excellence is such a good point. We'll talk about that in a moment. Samuel, I know actually that in ABF, you've tried a range of approaches here and, you know, some really interesting things, you know, from your perspective in terms of piloting and adoption, as you say, not kind of strangulating, as it were, you know, the adoption process. Can you just share a few bits about that?
Yeah, I touched on it at the beginning a little bit. You know, we focused on you know, getting people you know, confident, because believe it or not, you know, many people were, you know, a bit afraid of using AI from all the stuff that you've seen in the news. So you know, I think that for us was really the kind of, you know, foundation. So responsible use. So our, you know, focus there. We get the right technology and we can give them the right assurance around, you know, the technology is safe. You know, working with the leaders across the, you know, corporate function, whether it be, you know, legal, the data protection team, compliance, the cyber. So you know, from the smallest little things to have all of the right people on board. You know, whether it be comes out to the office about, you know, introducing our chatbot. So we started with a chatbot that got rave reviews. To then, you know, moving into kind of responsible use training, and the technology then, you know, around our chatbot and Microsoft, you know, Copilot, you know, coming second to our focus on using the technology. So that foundation kind of set us up, you know, very well for being, you know, confident, you know, that it was right to give the technology to the user base, right? So let them use the technology. So we sort of made it available to everybody, you know, in the corporate office, because, you know, we felt like, you know, you need to understand, you know, AI. You're going to have to. It's going to be, you know, a part of the way you go about, you know, work in the, you know, in the near future. So, you know, we might as well give everybody an opportunity to get started with the technology now. So we didn't put any constraints. And yeah, the feedback has been great. We still struggle with stats around adoption because of our
Mm.
environment, but the adoption from what we see looks, very, very high from our, perspective, in terms of using, things like Copilot for everyday use. And like I said, because we've got that foundation in place, some of the people that are really, really, really engaged in AI, they're looking at some pretty, cool use cases. Whether it be computer vision for health and safety, or we talked about the procurement data
Mm.
stuff, as well as a few other, pretty cool AI use cases around legal assistance and supporting our legal team, as well. So yeah, so that foundation has, moved us quickly into a place where we're reasonably confident about going after, more of the kind of game-changing uses of AI.
Yeah, that's great to hear, actually, because I speak with a few people, especially I've had a few conversations with a number of our HE clients. I was at a conference recently, and I was speaking with a CIO of one of the universities, and they were really quite concerned about kind of this approach and some of the risks with AI, in a sense, almost hampering this ability to kind of push forward. So it's really interesting to kind of hear your set the foundations, put some guardrails around it, build it, they will come. And then I think it's about then taking that feedback and integrating that feedback into further improvements, both in terms of those guardrails, but in terms of your selection process, your implementation process, etc. So that's kind of really, really interesting to kind of hear that. And actually, Richard, just going back to something that Kevin was talking about, I think a center of excellence can play quite a crucial role in this space. So do you want to talk a little bit about what a COE might mean in the context of kind of AI adoption and piloting?
Yeah, absolutely. I find it very interesting just hearing Samuel and Kevin's opinion there around the guardrails and the safety. And I don't think it can be underestimated that this is as much about making sure that the business and the business data is safe and secure, but also giving a safe space where people feel confident that they can go and experiment, because allowing people to experiment at the ground level, I think, is where a lot of the value can be realised from AI. They're living the day, the job day to day. They are the domain experts in what they do. They are best placed to identify where there is a use case and there is good return on the investment and application of AI. So ensuring that they've got the space to experiment and they feel confident and comfortable and supported in doing so, I think, is absolutely critical. And this is where a COE brings both an element of technology, but also a framework for embedding the culture that promotes that kind of experimentation. So really, when we have the visibility of what's going on, and the tooling will bring that immediately, it does give the opportunity to put some of those guardrails in place, again, from both the perspective of making sure the business is safe, but also people feel that they're in a safe space to experiment. That then means we can move on to measuring the adoption. So tracking who's actually using the tools, who are going to be your champions, who are going to help others with the adoption and building their confidence and experimentation of using the tools. But the business does need to provide that support. So we're not just talking about the governance and guardrails. We are having to really think about training the community and even reusable patterns, so people can pick up modular blocks and apply them to the problems that they're trying to solve, accelerating their route to a good outcome. And it's at that point then, because we've got all of this data, because we can see what's coming out of this, we're able to start to prove the value. So we can link adoption back to outcomes, productivity gains, service improvements, and we can measure the reduction in effort and the efficacy of better decision making as well. And finally, we should be able to scale much more deliberately. So taking out what works, expanding it, allowing others to benefit from it, and continuously improving both the solutions that come out of this and the governance that we wrap around them as well.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Kevin, I know that Adrian and Richard worked with your team in putting in place a center of excellence. Just some of those big beginning steps, initial steps around around the COE. Can you talk a little bit about what value you've had, from that so far?
Well, I think the diagram really talks about it's start small, and then as with many things, you encounter through that proof of concept, if you want to use that phrase, or testing out, or test phase, whatever, you start to learn things that actually you never were able to design in from the outset. And what the Center of Excellence does, as per this diagram, really is allows you to move from that concept to, okay, we need to scale this. It's ticking all the boxes as we go there, but it does it fairly quickly. And that time to market is always a challenge. We know there's resistance in organizations, yada, yada, yada. But actually, because you've got the data, because you've got a really good valid use case, because you've got the guardrails, it removes all of the barriers that really prevent you from moving at pace in providing enterprise solutions. So for me, where we've done it, it has been, quite honestly, transformational. But we're a fairly low mature organizations. I'm sure others have got similar models, but where we've adopted it, it actually has moved us on leaps and bounds.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Kevin. Samuel, you spoke earlier about kind of tracking the measuring the adoption itself, but also kind of measuring effectiveness. And I wonder whether you have any reflections, in particular about some of the things that potentially make that tracking a little bit more challenging. Do you, from your perspective, and sort of thoughts around navigating that?
Yeah, with the things that we've deployed, I think on the things that we think are game changing, the results are very obvious. Right? There's a specific measurable outcome, and if you don't hit that outcome, maybe we've used that technology in another use case, which we think it will work for. I think when it comes to everyday use of AI, depending on your environment, we use Microsoft, and our environment is a little bit complicated when it comes to getting some of the reporting out of that. But overall, when we look at the stats, the adoption looks great. For ABF, where we have deployed Microsoft Copilot. We've done lots of surveys and things like that as well across the user base, just to get some sentiment about adoption. Well, what I would say is we probably have not put as much or gotten as much out of some of the stats around the adoptions and things like that as well. So, but we know when we engage with people, we can see how they're using the technology day to day. We're getting really good feedback on that. But there are still pockets where it hasn't taken off. Like people are still a little bit cautious about the adoption. So we still got more work to do there.
Yeah.
Every day is not that often. Yeah. Go ahead, Kevin.
Sorry, Sam, but we have the same, which is why we measure both qualitative and quantitative data. The feedback that we get is far more intuitive than the quantitative data that we're able to get out of Microsoft. It's not easy, is it?
No. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's great. And Adrian, I don't know whether you've got any brief reflections on that. I guess on the quantitative side, for those people who don't even have the quantitative side, perhaps just a quick 30 seconds on how a COE might help, certainly in the Microsoft space.
Yeah, as you say, I think there's lots of tools out there. So the Microsoft COE, does actually help you capture some of that data around I guess who's using what and how they're using it, and really just understanding that community that you've obviously got out there. But yeah, it's something you've got to let grow and allow people to obviously learn and share their ideas around. And I think that's really where you gain that value.
That's great. Thank you. Well, thank you all very much. And at the start of the webinar today, we had a survey. So we're just going to have a quick look at what the survey results are, if they've come back. All right, so amazing. The vast majority of people think they've got a complex, it sounds like complex set of challenges kind of getting in place. But the data quality and integration point there is quite interesting, being the kind of the largest single bucket, and then moving on to kind of governance. It's really interesting that budget constraints and use cases aren't really the problem. It feels like, people actually feel like they might have some use cases understanding, but actually challenged with the data and with governance. Any reflections on that? Any surprises there, Kevin?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I think this is really interesting, because you can start with this, and AI becomes almost overwhelming, and you need a big grand AI strategy. I think that really is going to inhibit your adoption. I think for us, it's start with again, treat it like any other technology. So what are those real business problems you're trying to solve? And is AI the solution for them? Because clearly there is lots of use cases, and then you can start to think about scaling. You will deal with the guardrails. You will deal with your data in challenges. You will deal with efficacy. You will deal with all of that as part of those use cases. If you took AI out and just said, how are we going to fix this business problem? You would probably follow the same process. It is just making us feel somehow a little bit inadequate, that all of the things we've learned for decades, suddenly we have to throw out the window and this new thing's going to give us the answers. Quite honestly, it's not.
Okay. Samuel, any surprises from you?
No surprises from me either. I think with AI, you have to kind of starting with real work, not with a kind of grand strategic plan, because the technology is changing very quickly. And I think you see people will engage with AI when they feel like it's helping them in their kind of day to day. And then I think it grows very quickly when they can feel it actually making a difference. And I think the more that you can do to kind of embed it into their day-to-day working, embed it into your platforms, safely and securely, it definitely will enhance productivity and outcome from what I've seen so far, certainly in the last 6 months or so, with some of the technology we've been using.
Yeah, that's great. Kevin, I see your hand, and I'd like you to come in just before we finish. Just if I just ask you with your remarks, if you had one parting thought for someone who's right at the start of the AI adoption journey, and has been, if you were speaking to the IT director I was speaking with, who's thinking, oh my gosh, I can't get started, what would be your one parting thoughts? And then I'll come to you, Samuel.
To me, it's, Samuel said it, and I've said it, start with the real business problem. Put the technology conversation aside. Start with the business problem. AA may be part of that solution. It may not. Start with a business problem, wrap yourself around it, work with the business. And if AI falls out the back of that, absolutely. AI is the winner.
Right. And Samuel, parting thought for someone who's actually started, maybe they're thinking agentic AI, etc., and they're thinking about scaling now, they're thinking about kind of let's make this broader. What would be your parting thought?
I would say I do think it kind of works best, when AI is an extension of you, and your people, and your judgment, and I think that's where we started, with pulling a community of kind of leaders together, and if you do that, then this stuff does get embedded, and you build a really strong foundation to start from.
Thank you. Well, it just remains for me to thank you all very much. My sincere thanks to the panel. Great conversation. Wish we had more time. Thank you to the attendees. The recording will be available. Do please reach out to us if you wanted to talk about anything you've heard today, how we might be able to support your journey. We'll be delighted to. But thank you, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Samuel, Richard, Adrian. My sincere thanks to you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Pleasure.
All right.
And you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye now.
everyone. Take care. See you.